come this morning to Matthew chapter 9 and verses 27 to 34. As Jesus went on from there, two blind men followed him, calling out, "Have mercy on us, Son of David!" When he had got indoors, the blind men came to him, and he asked them, "Do you believe that I am able to do this?" "Yes, Lord," they replied. Then he touched their eyes and said, "According to your faith, let it be done to you." And their sight was restored. Jesus warned them sternly, "See that no one knows about this." But they went out and spread the news about him all over that region. While they were going out, a man who was demon-possessed and could not talk was brought to Jesus. And when the demon was driven out, the man who had been mute spoke. The crowd was amazed and said, "Nothing like this has ever been seen in Israel." But the Pharisees said, "It is by the prince of demons that he drives out demons." Maybe you've heard the phrase, "familiarity breeds contempt." That's often true, but it can also be true that familiarity breeds apathy. Let me give you an example of what I mean. Just a couple of months ago, just a couple of miles down the road at Wembley Stadium, the FA Cup semi-finals were played. 4 teams: Nottingham Forest, Crystal Palace, Manchester City and Aston Villa. Great achievement to make the semi-final of an FA Cup. Even the mighty Stockport County have only ever made the 5th round. And so it was a huge occasion for the fans of those teams. One of the semi-finals reflected that. Absolutely, totally sold out. Packed. But the other, the game between Nottingham Forest and Manchester City, there were thousands and thousands of empty seats. Not in the Nottingham Forest end, that was absolutely rammed. But Manchester City failed to sell lots and lots of their tickets, even for such a significant match. Now, why is that? Is it because there aren't very many Manchester City fans? Or that those fans aren't that committed? Well, no, it's not. It's because whilst for lots of clubs an FA Cup semi-final at Wembley is a huge deal because it doesn't happen very often, in recent times for Manchester City it has happened a lot. This season was the 7th consecutive season that they've reached the semi-finals of the FA Cup. Over the last decade or so, Manchester City have played at Wembley 28 times. It seems that the novelty has worn off for their fans. Over-familiarity breeds apathy, even with something amazing. I wonder if we can be a bit over-familiar with the miracles of Jesus. And therefore we can be a little bit apathetic, a little bit meh about them. There have been lots of miracles so far in Matthew's Gospel, and in particular here in this section that we've been looking at since Easter, here in chapters 8 and 9. And if we're Christians, or if we're at all familiar with the Christian faith, then we know that that's one of the things about Jesus, right? Jesus in the Gospels, he does miracles. And so maybe we could come to a reading like this morning, so we listen and we think, okay, cool. Jesus heals a couple of blind guys. He helps a mute person to talk. That's cool. I mean, last week, in the verses just before this, he raised a girl who had died. I mean, that seems even cooler. But, okay, cool. Maybe familiarity breeds apathy. Because let's just stop and think about what he's doing here. What's Matthew saying? He's saying that 2 guys who are blind, whose eyes do not work, who cannot see, come to Jesus. Now imagine they hadn't come to Jesus. Imagine they've gone to Moorfields Eye Hospital in London, a global centre of excellence when it comes to eye health. I know some of you here know it very well. Imagine they'd gone there. What would have happened? Well, let's say they get to see a doctor, they get to see a specialist, maybe they even get to see a consultant. They do lots of examinations, they do some scans, they do the tests. But these guys are completely blind. So the consultant says, well, we could try some gene therapies, we could put in some implants, we could maybe even do some sort of transplant. But to be very frank, it's going to take a very long time, it's going to be enormously expensive, and there is very, very little chance of success. We don't have a cure for blindness. And these men say, oh, wow, I mean, we've come a long way to get here. We've come from the past to be here. We were told this was the best. Is that all you can offer? Well, yes. Sorry. Even in 2025, even in the best specialist hospitals in the richest cities in the world, not much is the best we can do in this situation. But Jesus Christ, in a little house in Capernaum, at some point around 30 AD, Jesus Christ just touches their eyes. They feel the sensation of his fingers. And then there's a new sensation. It's the experience of their neurons firing. It's the feeling of light. The moment that a flat, pitch black world becomes washed with depth and colour. Jesus just did it. Just a moment, just a touch. And their sight was restored. Just think about the effect on these guys. Absolutely world-altering. Consider the impact on the mute man, possessed it in some way by a demonic force which crushes his personhood, which silences him. Released, given voice, able to communicate, able to interact, able to relate, given his life back. We may be very familiar with the fact that Jesus did these things. The Gospel writers all agree on that. Other first century sources, including those that don't come from a Christian perspective, all agree on the miracles that Jesus did. The first century Jewish historian Josephus put it that Jesus was a doer of wondrous deeds. But we mustn't become apathetic. We mustn't become too familiar. Because if we do, we may miss the absolutely life-changing impact that the miracles of Jesus have on us. And to help us see that this morning, I want to just ask a number of very simple questions about these verses. What is Jesus doing? What does that show us about who Jesus is? How is he able to do it? And why do I care? So what is Jesus doing? Now we can answer that question in a very straightforward kind of way. Here in this passage, he is opening the eyes of the blind and loosing the tongue of the mute. Previously in chapters 8 and 9, we've seen him cleanse the leper, heal, drive out demons, calm the storm. We've seen him perform a whole catalogue of miracles. Each one of them pretty remarkable on its own, but when we put them together... Now, I've never been to Rome, I've never seen the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel, but from those I've spoken to who have, I'm reliably informed that it is quite something. And partly that is just because of the cumulative effect of all the different aspects, all the different elements, all the different frescoes. Any one particular section, any one depiction on the ceiling on its own would be a pretty notable work of art in its own right. But when you put them all together, well, the effect is absolutely breathtaking. Well, so it is here with the miracles of Jesus. Each individual miracle is astonishing. But when you put them all together, the picture that's being painted here of what Jesus is doing is much more than even any individual one of these wondrous deeds. Because what we're seeing Jesus doing is pushing back the tide of sickness and sadness, driving out evil, ending oppression. He is masterfully, beautifully fixing what is broken and making all well. Jesus is putting right what is wrong with the world. Because disease, physical and mental anguish, danger, disability, death, these things should not be. I read an article 3 or 4 years ago now by a Christian writer, a lady who was blind, had gone blind in her teenage years, and she was reflecting on how she's kind of come to terms with her blindness and how she's now at peace with her blindness. In fact, the extent, she said, that she believed that when she died in heaven she would still be blind, because that had just become such an integral part of her identity. Now, of course, whilst we want to affirm that people, whoever we are, whatever our struggles, whatever our deficiencies, all made in God's image, all equal in worth, to be valued, to be honoured, I think I have to say that I disagree entirely with her. That's not right. It's great that someone learns to live with and be at peace with a physical issue like that, but we must say it's not how things should be. And Jesus, in his earthly ministry, demonstrated not only that, but the precious, precious truth that things need not be this way, and that things will not always be this way. The prophet Isaiah spoke of a day when one would come, when God would step in and put right what is wrong with the world. It says this: strengthen the feeble hands, steady the knees that give way. Say to those with fearful hearts, be strong, do not fear. Your God will come. He will come with vengeance, with divine retribution. He will come to save you. Then will the eyes of the blind be opened, and the ears of the deaf unstopped. Then will the lame leap like a deer, and the mute tongue shout for joy. Water will gush forth in the wilderness, and streams in the desert. The burning sand will become a pool, the thirsty ground bubbling springs. In the haunts where jackals once lay, grass and reeds and papyrus will grow. That's what Jesus is doing. And so what does that show us about who Jesus is? Well, again here we need to see the bigger picture. Because it's too easy to become apathetic about the miracles, or to think that Jesus is just a miracle worker. That's kind of his party piece. But the miracles, the work that Jesus is doing here is intended to reveal to us with unquestionable clarity and certainty who he is. And amazingly, in our passage today, it's the blind men who see it. There in verse 27. As Jesus went on from there, 2 blind men followed him, calling out, "Have mercy on us, Son of David." Son of David, they cried. David, of course, was the greatest of Israel's kings, the king after God's own heart, the king to whom God had sworn a promise that his house would remain on the throne forever. Because a king from his line would be the king. The king whose rule would be everlasting and whose reign would be marked by unadulterated goodness. The king who would put right what is wrong with the world. And Jesus is that king. He is the Son of David. And our kind of series in Matthew's Gospel is called The King and His Kingdom, because Matthew's concern is to show us the King, and more than that, to show us what life in His kingdom is like. It's how Matthew begins his Gospel. Matthew 1 verse 1. This is the genealogy of Jesus the Messiah, the Son of David. And yet here in chapter 9, for the first time in Matthew, somebody else sees it. The blind see it. Son of David. They've clearly heard about Jesus, about what he's doing, and they've joined the dots. They know that he is the Messiah. They know that he is God's long-promised saving king. And in seeing who he is, they can see what he's come to do. They know that he's the one come to show mercy in putting right what is wrong with the world. He has come for the needy, for the outcasts, for the suffering and the struggling. He has come to show mercy, and so they say, "Have mercy on us, Son of David." And how is he able to do it? Well, he's able to do it because he is God. There's not really another reasonable explanation, I don't think, for somebody being able to do things that only God can do. There's no human precedent for this. Before, as they say in verse 33, the crowd was amazed and said, "Nothing like this has ever been seen in Israel." Or since. Claim of Matthew has been very clear up front about who Jesus is. Again, back in chapter 1, the virgin will conceive and give birth to a son, and they will call him Emmanuel, which means God with us. And here he fleshes out that claim, that Jesus is God with us, with the historic evidence of Jesus' life. All of which makes the Pharisees' reaction there in verse 34 so glaringly unreasonable. But the Pharisees said it is by the prince of demons that he drives out demons. The Pharisees claim he's doing what he's doing, he's driving out the demons by the power of Satan, the prince of demons. But that's just a nonsensical thing to claim. Doesn't make any sense in the individual case of the mute man. It certainly doesn't make any sense in the wider picture. When a new Banksy appears on a wall somewhere, people look for a few key things, don't they? Things that mark it out as an authentic work of his art. Style, subject matter, the validation which he gives to his pieces online, that sort of thing. If something came along that bore none of those hallmarks, well, you'd be a mug. to believe that it was a genuine Banksy, wouldn't you? Satan is the prince of demons. He thrives in creating disorder, chaos, damage. What Jesus is doing is the exact opposite of all those things. It is the complete antidote to evil. By the power of God, for he truly is God, by the power of all that is good and pure and true, he does these things. That's why it bears all those hallmarks. We also see here, don't we, that he exercises his power in response to faith. Jesus puts right what is wrong with the world for those who come to him and believe in him to do so. We see that very plainly with the blind man. When he got indoors, the blind man came to him and he asked them, "Do you believe that I am able to do this?" "Yes, Lord," they replied. Then he touched their eyes and said, "According to your faith, let it be done to you." And their sight was restored. Their faith is somewhat better than their obedience. We see when he tells them not to go and tell anyone, but they can't help themselves because they have found the one who is able to fix what is broken in life. They have believed in him. They have put their faith in him. They've come to him, cried out to him, and received mercy and miraculous divine help in return. No wonder they want to go and spread the word. But seeing that requirement of faith here brings us to our final question this morning. Why do I care? In chapters 8 and 9 of Matthew, we are shown the work of the King. And we are shown clearly who Jesus is and what he has come to do. He has come to fix a broken world. He has come to mend fractured lives. He has come to end oppression, to bring freedom, to give life, to give hope, even in the face of death. To prompt celebration and joy at God's blessing. And we care about that because we live in a broken world. It might not be blindness or muteness. It might be rejection or abuse or a tumour or loneliness or arthritis or depression or war or grief. But we all know the pain of living in a broken world. And so we should care very deeply about the fact that Jesus came and demonstrated that he is the one who could put it right. And not put it right by standing apart from a suffering world, but by entering into it. Indeed, by taking upon himself a suffering that by rights he should have had no part in. He came to do all this by taking upon himself our sickness. He took up our infirmities and bore our diseases, so that sin and suffering and sickness and death may have no hold upon us and may one day be no more. We should care because the work of King Jesus, demonstrated in history then, is the work that Jesus will complete for all history. It is the story that will unfold into eternity when he returns. That is not in question. The question is whether we will do as the blind men do and put our faith in him, believe in him, whether we will come to him, whether we will cry out to him for mercy. Or whether, like the Pharisees, we will stand apart. I mean, just think of everything they've seen. What more evidence do they need about who Jesus is? You see, it's not lack of evidence that's the problem. It is a stubborn refusal to humbly come to Jesus, to have him put right what is wrong in us and what is wrong with the world. And to admit that they cannot, to admit that we cannot do that ourselves. What more evidence do you need? As you think about how you would respond to Jesus' question there in verse 28, do you believe that I can do this? What more do you need to see? Lord, open our blind eyes that we might see Jesus, that we might believe, that we might have faith and follow, that the life of the kingdom, the life that only the King who will give himself for his people, that life might be ours. Heavenly Father, bring us to Christ. And we ask this in his name. Amen.